Well, good morning, everybody. Just a quick preface on what we're going to cover today. This, first of all, is going to start off with the deep low that moved through the northwest. You can actually see some of the huge storms that erupted here in the northwest, and the cold air that's going to come in behind this, giving us the chance for some snow in the Rocky Mountains. We'll, of course, continue to cover Francine and the remnant moisture and how this particular tropical system will likely run out of kind of room to move around, and as a result, it might just stick around here and slowly slide into the southeast. But one of the bigger things I want to get into the discussion of is we've been talking about this positive WPO pattern we're in right now. And some of these deep troughs that keep coming into the northwest may extend into the upper Midwest and plains as we go forward. And that's been an interesting kind of transition in the recent model runs that we need to have a discussion about too. I'm still working on some new long-range ideas, and so we'll kind of filter in some of those tomorrow. As we should get some new updates on the possible strength of La Nina. So we'll save that for tomorrow. But I got to be downstairs in about an hour and a half to give a talk, so I wanted to make sure to get this out early today. So satellite data just from yesterday as the sun was setting, Francine did make landfall late in the afternoon. It was pretty powerful. We had wind speeds just off the coast, getting well over 100 miles an hour. And what was interesting about the track was that it clearly made its move more toward the east with time. So we saw more dry air intrusion on the backside, and the mid-level steering currents, just instead of taking this here, pushed it right over New Orleans last night. I'm sure you saw in the news quite a bit of the video footage of what this looked like coming over New Orleans. But a few other things to take note of. Last night I'm here in Minneapolis, and I watched the sunset brilliantly red because of all the wildfire smoke. The large plume of smoke that you see here going over the Four Corners, this is from yesterday's smoke plume from the large wildfire north of Los Angeles here, on the kind of the northeast side of Los Angeles. And we continued to see last night that fire burn, plus others to the north of there, both in California and Nevada. So this has been a just a very active mid-September pattern, and we expect a lot of these things to continue both in the tropics and with the deep lows coming into the northwest. We'll come back to both of those things in a moment. So I wanted to show you those storms yesterday were pretty potent. We did have some hail in some of these storms that came out of parts of Oregon into Idaho and then eventually into Montana as they erupted, and some other spots here in the northwest as well. So these were not, these were pretty. This was pretty intense convection for this time of year. Oftentimes we get too much warm air aloft in September for there to be deep convection, but it was pretty powerful. But it's going to be the rainfall that we need to spend some time talking about here from Francine, causing a lot of flooding issues. So as you just watch the storm system move through Louisiana, there's landfall yesterday right here, goes over the top of New Orleans, the eye almost right over the top, or it was over the top of New Orleans for a moment. But this is pushing heavier rain a bit farther to the east than I think, we started talking about this last week, where I thought it would go. And I thought we'd see more of this coming right up the Mississippi, but it seems to be more kind of heavily biased on its heavier rains to the north and east. Now, it is going to continue to track farther to the north, where it will eventually stall out. And we'll see what that looks like in the forecast models here in a few moments. But I wanted to check in on the power outages this morning. Mississippi, 52,500 without power. Louisiana, approaching 400,000. If we kind of take a closer look here, we can see those parishes that are without power. Some of these almost completely without power right now. So they'll be working hard to restore this. But the wind was quite strong as this made landfall. We were seeing gusts in the 70 to 90 mile an hour range as it made landfall, and just offshore, like I said, over 100. We look at the total precip over the last 72 hours, we can kind of now see both of these features. So the low that came into the northwest that's trying to eject today, it's going to be getting into the Canadian Prairie. I think we may have 3 more of these stacked up behind this coming in the same trajectory. And we're going to watch the heavier rain spread farther to the north. Some of the rain could actually even make it pretty far to the north in the Midwest here. It's sporadic, but there's chances. So I'm not talking about the heavy rain. All the heavy rain is going to be down here as the system tries to move through the mid-south, but then stalls out and gets drawn back toward the south and east. And don't forget, we are watching a system develop soon off the southeast coast. So all of that's still in play here as we go forward in this forecast. But I did want to zoom in. Now remember, this is through 6 a.m., but there's about a 2-hour lag in the totals. It's just this particular product, they have quality control measures on it. So what's released immediately does become refined with time. So we're looking here at total rainfall over the last 7 days. And we did have a couple of places like right around New Orleans picking up 9 inches of rain, which kind of falls within the range that we had expected. Now here's the bigger picture of the way this pattern's set up. we continue to see, as we talked about, lows originating in the Bering Sea, coming into the Gulf of Alaska, diving into troughs in the northwest. That's all still there. See this one? And here's the mid-level circulation around Francine. Now, Francine is running north into a kind of a blocked setup. You can see there's a high over the Great Lakes states here, right over Wisconsin right now, which is going to send this low north, the one that's in the northwest, and Francine's just going to struggle to find much motivation to move underneath this, which is why it's likely going to keep pushing north a little bit and then stall and move maybe back down here. Outside of that, that being the mainstay of this pattern, that's what's going to dominate a lot of our forecasts going forward. So thinking that through, just take a look at the bigger picture changes here. Over the next 7 days, this is the European model's precipitation anomaly forecast. So if you're dry, it's just in between these features. So it kind of extends from parts of Texas into sections of the central western Corn Belt to the Great Lakes states, and then here into eastern Canada and into the northeast. That's our drier spot. Storm systems are coming in like this, but one of them next week has got my attention. And as we watch Francine move down toward the southeast and the low developing here, I want to be watching next week for a deeper trough to come diving in and kick out a little shortwave ahead of it that could really increase the rainfall in this area. So that is going to be what we're going to watch, and it looks like this in the week 2. See that? So here's the low we're going to be watching develop next week. We'll to keep a look at how much rainfall this is going to give the Carolinas to Virginia and the Mid-Atlantic. But it's this I think it's the third. I'll have to go back and count again in a few moments. But this last system has a little kicker wave out ahead of it that could initiate some wet conditions in the Midwest, upper Midwest, western Corn Belt, northern plains, and of course into the Canadian prairie. That's the bit of development or change that we need to talk about, because most of this wetter weather, if you remember from this week's videos, I think it was just a bit farther to the west, right? So we talked more about not being able to get a lot of this moisture clear into the parts of the central Corn Belt, upper Midwest, upper Mississippi Basin. So keep that in mind as we go through this rest of this forecast video. All hazards weather map today. Down here, this is all flood watches, warnings, wind advisories. We still have the tropical storm warnings out for a large area. There is a tornado watch as well on the eastern side. Just a lot of a variety of hurricane-related advisories, watches, and warnings. We have the winter storm advisories that are on the backside of this in the Rockies. This is some air quality issues. This is high wind risk that extends into the plains. This is all red flag warning out ahead of this, given how dry it's been as of late. But we will be watching later on today for the risk of those strong storms in parts of Montana, getting over into the Dakotas, coming out of Wyoming. Tomorrow, the system moves farther to the east, and we're still keeping an eye down here, but not a major, storm threat created here in the upper Midwest as that low moves clear into Canada. So I wanted to show you what this looks like a bit. Let's blow this up once and have a closer look here. So this is through 6 a.m. this morning, and we're watching the forecast through the middle of the day today and into this afternoon. So it'll be this afternoon we're going to keep an eye on the leading edge of this low for the risk of some severe storms. Meanwhile, the heavy rain from Francine makes it into southern Illinois possibly, but certainly gets parts of Kentucky, Tennessee, northern Mississippi, and a large section of Alaska on its Arkansas on its northeast side. What we're going to see here in the forecast is as these storms kind of push their way tonight into the western Dakotas, we'll spread a little bit more of that rainfall to the north, and the high-res NAM does something kind of interesting. So you can imagine there's a front here that'll be there by Friday morning, and as that front moves north, some of the moisture from Francine seems to make it clear here into Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa. I'm not expecting much, but some of that could get into that area. And what's left of Francine is still kind of down here out of the major flow. So what it tends to do is just sit there and spin all the way through midday Saturday. And we'll have to see how far to the north in Illinois and Indiana and Missouri this moisture ends up getting. But certainly right through this corridor, we're expecting enough in terms of rainfall out of this to be meaningful for the crop. So when it's all said and done, we're going to go back through and look at Mississippi water levels. We'll look at the soil moisture change because we've been focusing a lot on that. And now that we're in this transition time period of moisture coming in, we'll leave those maps be and then do a comparison when it's all said and done. So that just gets you through, midday Saturday. And to be honest, I'm not fully convinced that the high res NAM is handling where the northern edge of this rainfall is going to be. So we'll do our multi-model analysis in a few moments. The European model, though, this is where I want to pick up on the winds. So this is starting early this morning, playing through this afternoon. And it's going to be a very high wind event. This is why the red flag warnings extend here, because it has been dry. And this is going to really increase our fire threat. I'll show you the gusts in just a few moments. But I want to keep an eye on something else. So that low curls into Canada. We see Francine's winds just get knocked out by the time we get into Saturday. That's expected. But then as we get into next week, this would be Sunday evening into Monday morning. We have our next deep low that comes back in the same spot for Tuesday morning. And that's going to be another very windy day in the plains here. Again, it's the next of at least 3 deep lows coming to the western United States. It'll also be Monday into Tuesday that we're keeping an eye on some development here off the coast, which now the National Hurricane Center has put out a risk for. I don't remember the percentage. We'll look at it in a few moments, but there's more to this, which we've been trying to keep an eye on here. So then as we play through next Wednesday, and look at this, another deep low next Wednesday, Thursday, curling up along the U.S.-Canada border there, and that one spins out. And then at the very end of this animation, this is out 10 days, there's, I guess, number 4 in the pattern coming through. And that's just going to be important to watch because the wind speeds with all of this are really adding up. If I just take you out there and show you a 10-day max gust, you can see that we're going to be on repeat with each one of these systems, bringing in the ability for 40 to 50 mile an hour wind gusts out here in this part of the plains, getting back into the western plains of Montana. So it's going to be very windy throughout the 4 corner states back into Nevada. We could have some strong winds also here in the Columbia Basin with this and just offshore. Meanwhile, we still have strong winds around Francine. We are expecting gusts today, 40 plus miles an hour. But this is about the end of where Francine's winds are going to have an impact. It'll probably be done by today for worrying about the stronger winds. It'll be early next week on Monday, Tuesday that we're going to keep an eye here on the Carolinas. All right. Now, I've been making this case, right? You've now seen this from me 3 times, that I think the WPO is the more dominant part of this signal. And as I showed you this yesterday, I put up my report on Tuesday as well. I made this case. I said, it looks like, we're going to be warmer and drier here with the wetter signal more, west, right where I wrote the word wetter. And I thought the Bermuda High was going to dictate where a lot of these tropical systems are going to go. And much of this still is in play, but we have to remember that the WPO is just one piece of the flow. We have other things that are, of course, influencing the pattern. Lots of other things. There's at least at any given time a dozen different what we call teleconnections, the WPO being one of them, that is influencing the pattern. And these last couple of waves coming through are the ones that are really beginning to increase, the chance of bringing more of this farther into the central United States, a place where I had labeled drier, right? So you can see that. But just as a reminder, this was just a generic view. We can, of course, have alterations to this, and I think this next system has a chance at doing that. And I want to show you what it looks like. I'll be honest, I've really liked the AI height pattern forecast. I think that it's capturing details that get lost in the ensemble simply because of the way the ensemble is created. That does not mean the ensemble is not. The ensemble is tremendously valuable, and I look at it every day, of course. But I want to show you this. So here's wave number 1. There's Francine. That one moves right into Canada. Friday, we see Francine stalling out here. There's that kind of higher of a low setup in the upper atmosphere. That's why Francine makes its way back toward Alabama and Georgia. Again, we'll look at the precip totals in a second. Here's wave number 2. This is already by Saturday night coming into the northwest. And watch, 3 comes in behind it, taking 2, this one here that's over Idaho and Montana, kicking it straight, there it is, straight into the southern Canadian prairie. Now we have wave, number 3 down here into California. And wave number 3 is ushered north, look at that, right there, by wave number 4, which comes in next Saturday, which is here. So that one is the one I'm watching. This would be, the 20th, 21st. This is close to the equinox. That's the wave that could be bringing in the better chances for heavier rainfall more into the Midwest, upper Midwest plains. But here it is. There's wave number 4 deep into Idaho. And that's where we maybe finally break away from this pattern temporarily. Okay? But, excuse me, we still see deeper lows that are forming all the way out there toward the end of September into the Gulf of Alaska, which is still very much a part of this pattern. So it's there, it's just there's little modifications to it, okay? So I wanted to point out a couple of things. 10-day snowfalls, look at this in the west. We will be getting some snow at very high elevation, right here along the spine of the Rockies, maybe in the Sierra Nevada, higher mountaintops here in central Nevada as well, maybe surrounding Salt Lake City. So there is chances for snow out of each of these next 4 waves that are coming in the next 10 to 12 days. So just wanted to point that out as well. But precip totals, here is the next 7 days. Now take note of this. We do see a much farther to the north progression of the precipitation here into southern Indiana, Illinois, out of Francine. Rainfall totals are starting to come in a little clearer here in the Carolinas and also into Virginia, with the possibility of that system next week dropping, better than 2 inches of rain. Still in the southeast, very, very wet. The WPC is now looking at parts of central Tennessee into northern Alabama at 6 to 7 inches of rain out of the remnants of Francine. We then see those at least 3 of the 4 big systems are accounted for here, possibly dropping some very wet weather into this area. And that last one beginning to show up with more moisture here, which we could get a little push from Francine out ahead of this. Okay, here's the WPC, excuse me, that was the WPC. This is the National Blend of Models. Here is the latest from the Artificial Intelligence. This is the high-res European model. Again, really got that focus here, but it's now, wow, I didn't notice this. You remember in the WPC that was dumping the heavy rain into Alabama, the Europeans dumping it right over central and north central Georgia with the potential for 6 to 10 inches of rain. And it's much wetter here. Gosh, much wetter here in the Carolinas. Sorry, I should have picked up on that before I recorded, but yes, that's an important change between the WPC and the European. I'm so glad I got these all in the same projection now. That's useful. Is the GFS picking up on it? It is, but still not with the same high totals. So we'll watch this all carefully. All right, European model picking up on the weather patterns here. We've already seen through Friday into Saturday. This is where we see the lingering effect. Oh, I see what it's doing. There's higher pressure here. Okay, so the flow's coming around. Whatever's left of Francine is moving in this direction, and there's going to be just a squeeze right there. There's going to be some frontogenesis in that area. And that's why the Europeans placed it there. Now, that would be out here to Saturday night to Sunday morning. Going beyond that, as we play this forward, sorry, there we go. Beyond this. Oh, my hotel internet's terrible. Come on. Here we go. Next Tuesday, Wednesday, so we're going to keep an eye on this low here. Next one comes into the northwest and starts to move its way. There it is, deeply rolling itself by Wednesday into Thursday into the southern Canadian prairie. This is when we're watching for some very heavy rain here. The model's even picking up some heavy rain in Iowa. I mean, this is pretty far out, so let's not rest too much on this. And then we play this toward the end of the progression of forecasts, and there's that, what is that, wave number 4? 3, no, this is 3 getting kicked out. 4 is deeply behind it. So this also is going to affect our precipitation probability. So this is our who's dry. We've looked at who's wet. For the next 5 days, we're very dry, kind of as I showed, in this corridor, right? Coming out of the southwest into parts of the high plains of Colorado and Wyoming, certainly Texas, big section here where the Missouri River comes through, but this is our wetter area down here. Watch this all just erode as I go from the next 5 days and add the 5 following days. So that's how much deeper that wave penetrates into the upper Midwest. So if there's a drier spot over the next 10 days, it's a lot of the Great Lakes and east, and it's down here in the southern plains and, of course, into Southern California, where we're still not into our normal flow pattern for moisture. We're going to have to wait into October, November for that to change. So just to make a point again about where this wet weather is going to be, the CPC yesterday did put out the risk from the 19th to the 20th, slight risk for some heavy precipitation here. And also, again, we're watching next week for that low that's off the coast we got to keep an eye on. So more on this in just a few seconds. I want to go now to talking about just purely the week 2 pattern, and then we'll talk overall about temperatures. So day 8 through 14 spread across the top. We've already looked at the European. You can see the CPC forecast. I just want to take note that it is the AI model that is most aggressive on those last 2 lows, really dumping a lot of wet conditions here in the in the northern plains, in the northwest. Excuse me. Well, certainly in the Montana part of the northwest, but here in the northwest Corn Belt. All right. Temperature-wise, frost risk is primarily going to be in the west where we've got high elevation. So that's what you're seeing here. And the high temperatures look something like this. Here's today's highs getting into tomorrow, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Each new wave that comes into the west is going to be, digging pretty deep, bringing in colder weather. Central Valley is struggling to get out of the 70s. Meanwhile, much above average temperatures in the Midwest all the way through the plains. This is still cloud cover dominated here. Next Tuesday, we're going to watch carefully the cloud cover and heavy rain that's over the Carolinas and Virginia. And here's next Wednesday. So most of that time period is very warm in this area, which we have repeated shots at cooler air in the west and then cooler in the southeast with the tropical system and the moisture there. When it comes to day 10 through 15, these maps, this is the European, these are the GFS ensemble, very similar overall in their setup. And we see this consistent behavior with deep troughs of low pressure originating here, diving into the Gulf of Alaska, coming through, running up over this ridge. And that has been something we've been kind of talking about now for several videos. So like I said, I need to see how long this pattern is going to last. And so right now we're just going to take it out 2 weeks, and we're going to kind of leave it there. I'll give you more of an in-depth discussion tomorrow on La Nina again and other factors. But I wanted to finish up with two other things. We did see this morning. Let's see if we got a new update now. We talked about Francine. We now see a 30%. There it is, a 30% chance of development. That's good. That means some of the models picked up on this early. National Hurricane Center is now keeping a much closer eye on the development of that low just off the coast. We still have a couple of other areas to watch, including Tropical Depression 7, but this isn't expected to do much but stay out to open ocean. And that all comes back to some of this discussion we had. Sorry, I didn't mean to click on that, but this one. If the Bermuda High tends to stay farther over here toward like Cape Verde Islands and the Azores, then more of these tropical systems will stay out to open ocean rather than curling their way toward the U.S. So that means we're going to keep an eye on the Gulf of Mexico going forward, but Bermuda High position is going to be critical, I think, to any new tropical development here. So last thing is just going to be South America. I did see yesterday, I was just kind of perusing Twitter and saw some reports of flooding in southern Brazil and also in Uruguay. And over the next 10 days, the new European model forecast that better rains down here from Buenos Aires over toward Cordoba, although near Santa Fe, a bit drier along the Paraná River, but very, very wet conditions, possibly in southern sections of Mato Grosso do Sul into Paraná and Santa Catarina and Rio Grande do Sul. Now, this is not monsoonally driven. That'd be up here. There's just a front that's going to be parked with stronger flow coming in kind of both directions into this region, increasing the risk of developing a stalled out frontal boundary. And this is too much rain too early. So this will be a problem for early crop progress in this area. So story still remains the same. October does not look dry for a lot of Brazil. And I think that that's going to be critical for the planting pace. And we'll just look at more depth of that tomorrow. So that's all I got for you today. Hope you have a good rest of your day, and we'll pick this up tomorrow morning when I'm back home. Thanks.